did?
A little bit of damage to the car.
Oh my gosh.
You're dropping them off?
Quite
this
make
early?
the corner.
My daughter's at the middle school.
Oh, okay.
Oh, middle school.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Just a reminder, we are recording.
Traffic.
Okay,
You're dropping them off this early?
My daughter's at the middle school.
Oh, okay.
Oh, middle school.
oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh, no. So why don't you do- no, 'cause they won't hear.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
My daughter's at the middle school.
Mute the player. Yeah, the YouTube player. So go to
Oh, right.
YouTube.
So to YouTube, where do I go then?
I think you're on it now.
Yeah, you're on the okay. Yeah, you're on the YouTube player.
Does anyone know which
If you,
button?
if you hover, you get a little thing on, yeah, right there. So then go down and mute the,
No, that's
No.
the stop.
No,
Oh, there it is, right there. You're
Right there,
so
the
close.
speaker.
Go right there to the speaker.
Yes.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, shoot. Or is that just
The
mute
other
and
way,
talk?
the other way?
Right there.
yeah, see them at the
Down at
bottom
bottom
there.
left.
Yeah,
Just under on Tom.
trying to make it. There you go.
Oh, this one, okay.
Okay. All right. Technology. Good.
Okay, so welcome everyone. I'm going to call to order the SEDCO Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, December 16th, 2021. Just a reminder, this is being live streamed as well as recorded. I will open this up for public comment. Do we have any?
Don't
Public
believe, Mark, do we
attendee?
have any attendees other than the board members?
Okay.
Okay.
Great, I will close the public comment. And you've got everything up or should we?
We've
Okay.
got everything.
Okay, great. I want to leave a lot of time for us to be able to have a conversation about the downtown plan. So I'm going to push the roundtable to after that, to the end of the. I'm going to actually hand this over to Travis as we.
Oh.
I've got to do the approval. Sorry.
That's right. And we might want to introduce
Oh.
everybody because since we have a new member, a new
Yes,
liaison.
yes. Okay, so why don't we go around the table and do a quick introduction? Not that. Oh, there,
And there's Dave.
Dave.
Okay, we are full up.
Perfect. I am Andrea Collard. I'm the Marketing and Life Enrichment Director at Piper Shores, and I am the chair of the SEDCO Board of Directors for the last time. This is Kevin and my last meeting.
As
but-
board members.
As board members, so.
Kevin Freeman,
Travis Kennedy.
Jim Hartley, Alan Paul, John Krasnick,
Karen Martin.
And Magda?
And then Rick, you want to, Rick looks frozen. Dave,
Okay.
and we lost Rick, that was Rick Shanae for a brief moment.
And I'm
And
Dave
then-
Martin.
Okay. And then Paul, you want to say anything or say hi? Paul
I
is-
am the new I'm the new town council liaison for this year, so I will be attending for at least the next year.
And I'm pretty sure, Paul, you know Tom. So
Yeah, pretty well at this point, I think, right?
Nice to make your acquaintance.
Want to get the budget? Any discussion? Motion to.
so moved. Second.
All in favor? Meeting minutes? Great. Okay, so the downtown plan, Travis.
Sure.
Through this?
Yeah, and this is, I mean, this ought to not require, I think, I guess, tell me all what you want, but we've talked about the downtown committee at every one of our meetings. at our most recent meeting, it was after the committee had finished our work and Karen and I were working on the final report. So I think that we've sort of delivered to the board the content of the report. I know you all hopefully had a chance to see it. So if you'd like, I can kind of talk through it again, but Karen and I thought about instead sort of talking about the themes instead of the content. And so Karen produced a very brief PowerPoint that will just give us a chance to guide our discussion.
Can you, guys, can you see, actually, I'm sharing the screen. I just want to make sure that you can see that.
Yes,
Hello?
it looks, yes, it looks good.
Okay,
Alright.
great. Sorry.
Can the screen be moved a little toward the middle of the table?
Maybe.
It's on the.
Oh, it's on the,
It's on the big
All right.
That-
got it on the big screen. Okay. All right.
I had it.
Yeah, and so Travis, please join me at any point, but as the committee was working through what their desires for the downtown was, they really began to focus on a couple of specific areas. Certainly one was authenticity, understanding how can this not be a cookie cutter or a strip center, what is going to make this downtown really authentic to Scarborough in particular. There's a lot of discussion about signage and streetscape because that's part of branding and giving an identity to the community and to the downtown in general. There is a tremendous conversations about gathering spaces. And really what they were looking for is what they call the collision points. How do you run into people? And this is something that we saw from the comp plan comments to the survey. Where do you run into people on a casual basis? That just doesn't seem to really exist in Scarborough. So those collision points for people were really important. Transportation is another issue. Understanding how the roads will work and making sure that for the downtown area, the traffic congestion or the traffic slowed down. And we'll get into a little more of that when we look at the map. And the transportation will put in there the connections to the rest of Oak Hill and the municipal campus. And, they really talked about, should there be, a theme for the downtown? Is the theme going to be, they talked about sustainability as a potential theme. They talked about coastal communities as a theme. And so they really had some discussions about that. And certainly that's connected to the discussion of authenticity. And then, certainly something very important to the committee was, how do we know if we've been successful? And this picture, the rendering here is just a rendering of the grandstand, and they did spend a lot of time on the grandstand as well. This is just a quick look at what the concept plan was that was produced by the consultants for the Downs. And Travis, help me make sure I'm pointing out all the details, but the big difference here is originally, I think, when the committee got started and when the downtown process started, the concept was the downtown was sort of focused on the horizontal space of the grandstand. So jetting out, really using the grandstand, the width of the grandstand as the anchor to the downtown. And through much discussion, the real change here was that some of the committee members, or one in particular, really felt that the grandstand would just dominate and overwhelm the downtown if it were the center point. And so one of the things that the consultants did is said, well, you don't have to use the whole horizontal piece. You can really reorient and use the end point as the focal point. And that's what that drawing was showing you is, bringing out an overhang, creating a community space. And then there was a great deal of discussion about the grandstand. And I think the committee had some tremendous discussions about the uniqueness of the property, the potential uses. There was discussion with the library. There's a lot of different discussion with respect to the grandstand. And I think they certainly came up with some alternative theories about how to use it, and really focusing in on this green space where they would consider to be that area where you have those collision points. And I think the other main point was the green space, the village green, is not a park. You know, we've got Memorial Park. The green space is something, it has a different function. And the consultants did suggest that it needed to be a bit smaller than I think was originally conceived. And that is to make it possible to see people across the green and to, you know, really have some of those collision points and to really connect those uses that are around the fringe. So that's why you see the green space really becoming a little bit smaller and this triangular shape. And I think one of the other pieces to this is the consultants brought down the location of the downtown to really be seen by one of the major thoroughfares going through Scarborough Downs. And that was important for a couple of reasons. One, you know, Scarborough Downs is already tucked away. You know, it may be in the center of town, but it's not like when you drive by, you see it. So making sure that if you go into the Downs, you almost have to go through the downtown area. And I think that was one of the pieces that they really thought was important. And I think one of the other pieces that they talked about was the Downs really does have a concept of doing really a grocery store as an anchor to the bottom. It's not necessarily a small downtown use, but it is something that draws people in. There's parking. The idea is people might go to the grocery store, they park, and they go to lunch, you know, walking down the street, walking down the main street in downtown. So Travis, is there anything else that we want to point out about the space here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the important thing that we wanted to focus on is that, you know, the original models, the design was built around a main street that ran up from Scarborough Downs Road, beyond the grandstand to essentially another park. And the downtown was the main street. And the committee really liked the idea of changing that feeling to the downtown being the center of a bullseye. And so that's why we have that green there, which, as Karen mentioned, importantly, is not a park. It's the center of the bullseye. It's the collision space where you can agree, we'll find each other at the green and we'll figure out where to eat, or we'll drop the kids off at the green, you name it. And so we wanted to really make sure that we were not giving the impression that we're building a park that's ringed with retail. We're building a ring of retail with some green space in the middle for people to cross. And it'll design a more sort of walkable, open space for people to go, rather than either like a city grid or, yeah, I mean, a park where you don't feel like you're engaged with everybody around it. So that was sort of the philosophy behind that. But also, I mean, if you look, you can see recreation fields on the outside. There's Memorial Park. This model made a lot of sense to us. And it also, as Karen mentioned, you sort of have to drive through it, because there were two major concerns that we had. Number one, we're worried that it could feel like you're in somebody's backyard when you go to the downtown. There's a lot of residential that is sort of necessary to make a successful downtown. It's going to be tall buildings. We didn't want you to feel like you have to go behind a tall building to get to the downtown and then you're sort of trespassing. We wanted it to feel like it belongs to the community. And then the other one is just that no matter how hard they try, and I believe they are, it's going to feel like you're going somewhere. You're not passing through downtown every day. So we wanted to figure out how to drive people to it as much as possible, which is why moving it down to Scarborough Downs Road, right near a grocery store and potentially some other sort of chore businesses will get people sort of the regular feeling that they're going through the downtown or going through the downtown. So it really feels like it's public space and not this private campus that you're going to, that you feel like you either have to spend money or leave at a certain time or whatever. And so I believe, and I know that a lot of the other committees said too, that this change in the model really accomplished both of those things.
And just to give everyone a perception of distance, so that ring on the outside there is about a quarter mile. And quarter mile is maybe 15-minute walk if you're pretty slow. You know, if you're walking in the gate, I think you walk faster. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
As I'm looking at dining and around the green, is there opportunities for outdoor dining as well?
It was a very subject conversation.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I don't know if you happen to have the pictures, the ground level pictures.
But just
One of the things that the consultant drew, you can't totally tell here, but I mean, they drew extra space for sidewalk dining. How they have it developed here, and this
Okay.
may be an issue, it may be an issue for snow clearance and other things,
Yeah.
but they have the sidewalk flat with the road. So, you know, during, you know, maybe on Friday or Saturday evenings, that road could be partially closed and dining could expand into the street. They wanted to make flexibility for more regular outside stuff. I mean, our first meeting, we talked about how there's a trend that the pandemic has certainly inspired and that we can capitalize on, which is that people like to be outside, when they can be, especially for eating. And so that was something that we really wanted to impart upon the Crossroads guys, whenever possible, create the space to eat outside.
I was at a suburb of Denver this past summer, and there were this very similar feel of some retail and some restaurants with a really small green. You know, not like a center like this, but just even just in a small area. They had a band playing, there were kids playing outside. All the restaurants have like movable windows and doors so that it was just open, and it was wonderful. It brought such a great sense of community. And so that, you know, that's really nice to see.
Yeah, it was almost every meeting conversation.
Yeah,
How do we let people
yeah.
feel comfortable being outside?
Yeah.
And just a reminder, here are the sort of the top level findings, and Travis, let me know if we've left anything out, but the downtown within the downs must be for the community. Travis has pointed that out. It's not a downtown for the downs. Goody Clancy, which was the architect and planners who did the downtown, I think the committee felt like that was a great start. It might not be the end, but it was a great representation of the concept that the committee had started with. Village Green, it's essential to promote connectivity. We've already talked about it. It's not a park. The grandstand is iconic to Scarborough, and it should be preserved if feasible. We put that if feasible out there because we know that there's a lot of issues with, you know, repurposing such a building.
Can I make one other point on
Yeah.
that I think is important? So we did have a subcommittee that just worked on the greenstand. And their final report is fantastic if you haven't had a chance to read it. But there was sort of a second point that was handcuffed to that first one, which is that if the grandstand is preserved, there should be every measure taken to create public use for it. So it's not preserved, but it becomes condos or it becomes all a hotel or something. At least some portion of the grandstand, if it's going to be this big hulking thing on the corner of the downtown that also is historic, should welcome the public to be using it for some purpose or another, whether it's a sort of Faneuil Hall style shop or if it's recreation space, particularly in the winter. Those two things were kind of handcuffed together where we said, we would love for you to say that, and if you say that, we expect that it should have public access. And that brings with it complications because it'll be really expensive to make it nice. And the developers understandably don't just want to give that away for free. So the town will probably have to consider what their commitment might be to a preserved grandstand if they want it to be either indoor commerce or indoor recreation.
And Travis, you might want to talk about for a second the other subcommittee who did such great work.
Yeah, the other subcommittee operated for almost the whole length of the committee's work, and they were the modeling committee. So they, exactly like you talked about, Andrea, they researched other successful recent downtown and community projects all over the country. They zeroed in on a few that were sort of closer to us in New England and the Northeast, and they created a really thorough document that sort of hits on all of these key points that we've talked about, where it's been done well, why it's been done well. They called the developers of those projects and fired questions at them. It was something that I know the Crossroads guys really appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, they did everything from calling these places and interviewing people. They just did some phenomenal work. So quickly, connectivity, we talked about, it's critical to, balance the downtown area, make sure it's connected. Zoning for the Crossroads was determined, it's really pretty reasonable right now. It really is doing what they need to with respect to uses. There may be some smaller requests come in for changes like design standards and things like that, if they want to do flat streets or something. So there may be some small things on the edges, but in general, the uses and the ability to do what they need to do really is built into the zone as it exists. And I think the committee spent a little bit of time or some time on housing, and where they came down on this is, they certainly support housing in a downtown area. It supports the downtown uses and development, but they backed away from saying how much or when or where, and that's really a council piece that I think the committee was very well aware of the larger implications of housing development, and left that charge with the council, but certainly supported the concept that housing in the downtown area really does help bring people and companies to the area. And then, an ongoing management structure is going to be needed. And then, lastly, they did leave some questions up to the council. How the downs of the town are going to cooperate in the future on the downtown. Really, how are we going to work on branding and signage and connect the downs and the town at large. And then, what town boards and committees should be involved in really the next phase of the downtown. And that piece is really something that I think we wanted to bring to the board and get us started about thinking about our role in economic development. And certainly we have, a stake in what happens in the downtown, and that's within our bailiwick, whether it's, assigning some of our marketing dollars to a downtown campaign or those types of things, looking at the branding and the signage. So that's where I think Travis and I wanted to bring this to you and start that discussion of what role, the town is going to have some decisions to make about how they were involved, but some of this is in our normal bailiwick, and I think we just need to say, hey, do we want to focus on a marketing campaign next year or the year after? Really putting it back in our discussion area of what are the things that we think we can contribute to making the downtown successful.
What is the timeline? Or is there a timeline in terms of approvals and like where?
I don't think there is. We might, I should shut that down. Let's look at it. I might turn to Tom and Paul on that to see if they have a feeling for timing. Paul, do you want to maybe talk about the exemption request, or Tom, either one, what's going on with that and what you see some time in from the downtown is, or from the council's perspective?
I think just that it helps the board know where and when we need to
Right.
be.
We don't want to be ahead of the council. We
Yeah.
just want to be helpful and supportive.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, if an educated guess, I mean, downtown completion, so to speak, 3 years, right? 4 years possibly. Do I think that they'll get a shovel in the ground the year after next? I think that's realistic. I think step one for us and probably for the topic of conversation is, when do we even start visualizing visualizing it, what it is exactly, defining it a bit more. Right now, it's all a little undefined. But I think, you know, if it can start getting some definition sometime between mid to late part of 2022, I think we'll be in good shape. And knowing these guys, I think from there it'll be executed relatively quickly. But I would say just for this initial get off the ground exemption request, we probably have, I feel like probably about 6 months before we all kind of have an idea of exactly, or a clearer idea of what the downtown is going to physically look like. Tom, I don't know if you can add to that.
Yeah, no, I would just say, I think they're anxious. You know, they have had tremendous success. So they're in a position to turn all their energies, attention, and resources, and I leave that last, toward the downtown component. So they are anxious to get underway. What Paul and I think have come to appreciate, and what came out a bit last night, is that they are on the doorstep of major investment. And so that's I think they characterized it that they're at a crossroads, ironically enough, that this next step is different than what they do. I think it's a bit scary, and for a lot of different reasons, it costs a lot of money. And so though they're anxious to get underway, what they're saying is they need some assurance, certainty, clarity, you know, characterize it as you wish, around what they can do on the residential side. And just if I could, while I've got the thought in my mind, I think the challenge for us is that the exemption is by definition and rule specific to residential construction. The town is really not interested in that piece. I think there's an appreciation that that has to be a component. We're really interested in the nuts and bolts. What's all the other stuff, you know, that this plan starts to touch on. And so if I could predict, I think this process is going to have to go down that road to some length, maybe not as far as many of us would like in terms of exactly what's going to happen where. But I think for the council to be comfortable with granting some sort of even limited exemption, they're going to have a better sense of what we're getting in return. And it's just too nebulous. And I don't think they're playing us when they say, you know, we don't know yet. We haven't planned it, because residential is such an integral part of it. So, you know, it's going to be interesting over the next few months to kind of sort through that.
Yeah. So, I mean, with their exemption requests, and even in the discussions we're having, you know, they're not referencing, for instance, that map that you guys just pulled up, right? That came out of the downtown committee. You know, there's that, I mean, that's all very useful, and I hope we stay relatively true to it. But as far as like what's before us, or what they are officially presenting us, it's still a big empty block of land. And so that's going to be, I think that's going to be difficult to market for a while. However, I do think just within the town, you know, any help that the town can have to get people to understand what's happening in there, I think would be very much appreciated. So, you know, perhaps you guys use your resources earlier than expected, just to help, you know, perhaps local businesses understand the opportunity that's there. And I think one of the challenges is that it is the middle of town, but it is buried, right? So, I mean, to me, those can start getting tackled early and often to help. But yeah, it's a tough call, but, you know, do I think we'll get through it we'll get through it. When's it going to be done? Not sure, but when are we going to have a rendering? Hopefully sometime mid next year, if we're all doing our job right. So
I guess just if I could, just a couple of thoughts in this regard. You know, we have been successful to date, and they have been successful without the town making any investment. You know, the CEA really serves to support, and there's reward on the back end, but it requires them to take the first step, and there's risk and all of that associated. And I think that's exactly the position we ought to take. And therefore, I don't expect us to take any different position on this next piece of the puzzle. I think it's going to continue to be privately funded. And so the challenge is to get them to a point of confidence that they can pull that trigger. So that's going to be a interesting conversation, to say the least. I guess the last point I just want to go back to, Travis made it in passing. My fear, they're going to do something there. There's no question. My fear is that if they don't have the support and they're left to their own devices, they're going to do something that we're all disappointed in. And they may be disappointed in, that it's going to be there to serve the folks that can walk to it and live in there. And it's not the true town center that we, I think, all hope it could be and will be. So there's the challenge, is to find a way to give them the confidence and give us the assurance that we have an appreciation for what we're going to get at the end of this thing.
I think the other challenge for the board is to remind ourselves that downtown is both Oak Hill and the Downs. And one suggestion might be, we as SEDCO probably have an opportunity to reach out to the Oak Hill businesses and start with them, talk about what's happening in Oak Hill, as the Downs becomes more defined. But that's certainly an element that there needs some attention, and certainly could be a focus for us as some of the key elements are falling into place for the Downs. I think one of the other areas that we could consider is we have connections in the business community, and what we want is the business community to feel attached to what's happening at the Downs and what's happening, in Oak Hill and the whole area. And I think that's one of the things that we could also work on, is making sure that the local businesses feel connected, to this downtown and understand how it could support them. So those two areas make sense to me, and doesn't step on anything the council is doing with respect to, regulatory issues. We're really keeping people informed and excited about what may happen at the Downs.
And one of the, and I don't know if this fits your role, but one of the things I've talked to Rocky about is, I don't expect a list of tenants, right? But it would be interested, when they did the innovation district they had to go out and have a team execute signing some pretty big tenants in IDEX, and that took a lot of energy and effort. It'd be interesting to have some snapshot or some sort of feel for, hey, what are local businesses that would come to the Downs, or what are local businesses that will come to the Downs? Not saying anybody's signing any leases, but the more that we can understand and be certain that, hey, that this downtown is instantly viable, I think would help. And like I said, I don't know how we get there without, they're certainly not in the position where they're going to offer any leases to anybody, because they don't know what buildings they're building. But it would help the council to say, sorry, a colleague just knocked on my door there. It would help the council just to know how much energy is behind the downtown area from local businesses, is what I'm trying to say.
My question is part of what you were doing, Travis, was there ever any identified corridor to get from the Downs to Oak Hill?
No. So we had a few members who joined the committee largely to make sure it wasn't their residential street, I think.
Yeah.
What we eventually landed on is that such a corridor must exist. I think in the very late final run-up, we had some committee members trying to rewrite that section to assign it to each other's neighborhoods or just not their own. And so where we finally landed is that our committee are not engineers, we're not capable of designing that, but that such a corridor must exist.
Yeah, because there was a recent development approved that might have helped get to the Sawyer Road area at least, but that space is now gone. So I was just curious if anything else had been identified.
It's a huge challenge.
Yeah,
it's a huge challenge for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, Alan, the actual, I'll read the finding. It says connectivity from the Downs to the municipal campus and the balance of Oak Hill is critical to the future for a downtown for Scarborough. More details on the trails, pedestrian ways, and vehicle access are needed to ensure that these are connections to Oak Hill and the municipal campus. So as Travis said, we really tried to take a light touch, but acknowledge the fact that that's a critical piece.
Do we think that eminent play at some point to make that happen?
That's always an option. That's the option of last resort.
Yeah.
I think There's going to need to be a ton of outreach to the folks on Sawyer Road. There's currently a zoning prohibition that doesn't allow vehicular access, essentially. And I think just being good neighbors, we need a good public process to engage them, to understand their concerns and see if there's a way to make this happen and minimize any impacts.
Going to toss out there, sort of piggybacking on what Paul said. Our interests and Crossroads interests largely align for what we want to happen down there. I mean, they want reliable tenants who are going to stay for a long time and who are going to bring business. That tenant could be 5 marijuana shops, right? And so I think our interests diverges slightly, where we have a responsibility to think about what economic development in Scarborough really should look like over the course of the next generation. And that may mean whether it's us trying to incentivize or market to, or just identify what does Scarborough really need and what's the, what's the identity of the economy of the Downs and what's important to us there. I'm just gonna say we should be trying to bring in more minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and small businesses. And so I think however we can contribute to those efforts to helping attract and recruit businesses that are what we want to be and what we want the downtown to be, that's a way where I think we can enhance what they're doing, because they have their imperative is pretty clear. They need it to be successful. We need it to be successful in the way that I think why we're all here, why we're all committed to SEDCO, which is sort of our vision for Scarborough's economy, and who should be participating in it and how we can support that.
So I have a question in the sense of we need buy-in from the community, the larger community, to sort of move this forward in some ways, whether it's the neighborhoods or the businesses. Tom, you said the town is really not investing in this from a, I'm guessing essentially from a financial standpoint, that the town's not really engaging any monies into this outside of the agreements that have already existed.
Yeah, I was just saying we haven't historically, and I don't expect that's going to change as we engage on this next level conversation. So the risk is, the downside risk to us is minimized, right? We don't have any risk out there up front. Again, the reward to them is on the back end, but it requires them to put the money up front.
Right.
And
So,
if I had to speculate, I think there's just a lot of moving parts, and this is something that very few entities have ever done and done well. And so there's trepidation. If you look at what's happened in the retail sector and the office sector, just in the last 18 months, that's gone sideways. And those were two critical uses that I think we all appreciate could and should play some role, if not a prominent role, in a downtown. And so for all those reasons, I think there's just a lot of anxiety around this next step.
I'm wondering about the community center. When I think about is there that sports center, but the community center sort of has fallen off the plan, or is that still considered a part of that center?
Paul, I'll let you take that one.
And the only reason I was asking that is I think when you have something like that where the town's engaged, the residents of the town are engaged.
That's true.
Yeah, so I mean, the official status of the community center as it was 2.5 years ago is we haven't taken action on it. I don't think that the way it was presented initially 2.5 years ago, there's certainly not support for the initial proposal from the Downs folks 2.5 years ago. Personally, I think according to the Downs, the recreation center is still coming. They're still adamant about coming. If that's the case, and I'm just speaking purely for myself, I've pivoted to saying, is there a way to get preferred swim time to have smaller leases to use the facility for the town at specific times. That's just my working idea personally. Do I think the community center conversation is over? It probably is, unless something shifts from where we were 2.5 years ago. And frankly, we owe it to, we never voted on it, right? So Kevin, you were on the committee, right? I think we accepted it. And then another proposal actually came through the night after. And then COVID hit. So we had this almost a secondary proposal, which was kind of a Hail Mary to see if it could pique our interest. COVID hit, and then it all kind of fell apart. But I mean, I think, Kevin, you lived through this. I think that we went a little too big early for that community center. I think, and to Rocky's credit, he was kicking and screaming the whole way, saying we were going too big. It was originally going to be something between 40 and 50,000. And I think the final product was about 115,000 square feet. And I think that it just unfortunately made the finances very, very hard to get by. I don't even know if I'm answering your question. That's where we are with the community center.
Yeah, what I heard last night, this question came up in conversation with the Crossroads team. I think their strong preference is to do something in coordination with the town. I don't know what that something is. And if that does not come to fruition, I think they then are going to pivot back to a private-based something. So I think in our best interest and for them, we ought to push through that issue to see if there's any opportunity for partnership. And it may be something much lesser than we previously talked about. But that sounds like we have two parties that are interested in talking and exploring how we can make something happen. We ought to push through that conversation sooner than later, I think.
Yeah. And that's part of this exemption request is I don't know how many people have read it or watched last night, but what we don't have is they haven't plopped down a master plan or something that resembles a master plan and say, hey, we want to build this. And that takes a ton of units, and here are where the units are, and here's where the retail is. We don't have any of that, right? Because they are too anxious, with good reason, to offer that up because they want to know that we're going to give them permission to give the units. So we are in this circle where we want to protect the community's interest, right? The first bullet point to me is the biggest one, right? We want to make sure we get a downtown that is for Scarborough. And I think we are ultra protective of that. They need to make sure they can finance all of this, and they can't move forward without us saying, let it rip. So we're going to get through it. And I think I think ultimately we're going to end in a good spot. And I think the community center in some form or another should be at least fair game to discuss. We right now, in my opinion, this is it. This will be like our last bite of the apple to get amenities for Scarborough, right? They don't have much of a use for us after this. And I say that as a positive. I hope we can all take 3 years off and not yell at each other anymore. So I hope there's some opportunity there to discuss the community center in some form.
I know Kevin's gonna have to leave very shortly, so I give him an opportunity.
Yeah.
I see 3 steps. One is the data that has been supplied supports that there has to be some sort of negotiation because a retailer is not going to go in unless they have the density, and that data seems to show that. So that's number one. Number 2 is the council has shown a willingness to at least begin a negotiation. And I think that's an imperative, and it appears to be underway. And number 3, which I was really encouraged to hear you say, Paul, is that we've got some sort of time frame for maybe how long that negotiation may take, 6 to 6.5 months. So if SEDCO were to take a step-by-step approach, and yes, we know somewhere along the line a community center is something that we'd like to have, but if we could identify our steps, our action steps that we can take parallel to the council and the town and the Downs negotiation process, that we'd really be well served by that. And so I'm actually very encouraged by everything that I've heard this morning, and just wanted an opportunity to say that. I am going to have to step out of the meeting. I have a conflicting USM board meeting, and I think there's some things going on at the University of Southern Maine. So I'm going to step out, but thank you, and happy holidays, everyone.
So we do want to just say, this may be the last meeting for Kevin as a board member, but he will be back in February. So we going to talk about this in a minute, another role for Kevin and Andrea. So this is not Kevin's last meeting.
Yeah, that's
Good.
God. And I had to have
Just as a
stipulation of
voting
that
member,
before accepting the USM.
right, just as a voting member.
Yeah, just as a voting member. He's got
Happy
that
holidays, everyone.
Thank
Same to you.
Can I just ask a quick question? This exemption for the house, are they asking, because I thought this might have been discussed. Are they asking for more housing than initially was planned? Because I didn't think they were, right?
No, they're not. They're not. It's just the exemptions over amount of acreage right now, the 90 acres surrounding the downtown. And so unfortunately, we don't have they haven't presented it in a way where there's a timetable, but no, I trust that we're looking at 2,000 units when this thing's done.
Okay, yeah.
Oh,
Pace of
It's the
development.
pace, and this goes to the fact that, if you recall, when the downs first started, they were initially saying that the downtown could take 20+ years.
Yeah.
And so seeing, as Tom said, how successful it's been, that the fact that they're talking about this now.
right,
Well, so the guidance that they got is that there needs to be a certain, and there's no magic number, but there's a sense there needs to be a certain amount of density of housing around the downtown for the downtown to be successful beyond 5 p.m. on the weekends. Enough people have to live within that quarter-mile circle, basically. And the only way to do that is to build more dense and up, and they can only do that fast. So they were asking for an exemption to build more residential faster because these units are in these like 4-story apartment buildings, which you can only do all at once. But of course, that opens us up to a whole bunch of questions about what does it mean to add all these people down here all at once. And so that's the debate. It's not more, it's just faster.
And Paul, just so I understand what you were saying, were you saying that this leverage that we have to grant this exemption were you saying that's really the last thing they'll need from us? And so that's our last chance to use that as chip?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Right, exactly. So the hello, sir. How are you? Good to see you. I will see you one. Sorry. I haven't seen him for 5 years. He just popped in my office. Sorry, I got distracted. Yes, that's precisely what I'm saying. So right now this is right. So if they have that exemption, then they're off to the races and they can do essentially, they can do whatever they want, right? But in that exemption, we haven't really defined what the downtown would be, right? And so it's not that I distrust Rocky and Peter, but the way that exemption is written is we would be left with kind of, okay, now they're on autopilot and they build out that downtown exactly how they, how it fits their model. And, I think it's fair that we want to try to say, okay, well, let's try to influence you that, that collision park, we want to make sure that's not a half of acre. We want it at least an acre. Right. And so, yeah, that's the last straw. I think in this case, I think their rapid success is almost, it just has now I think Travis just hit the nail on the head. We're all thinking a 20-year time frame, and now all of a sudden, within the first 5 years, we're almost deciding everything, right? And so that's anxiety-inducing for us, because I think everybody thought this would be a little bit more of a slow burn and incremental. And I think we all fully appreciate this downtown area can't be a 10-year process, and nobody wants it to be. We just want it to be, it's just the classic example of chicken and egg in this case. But yes, if once they get that exemption, I don't know how as a town we would leverage anything else to get an amenity, to get some public space, to get a lease for community, whatever it happens to be. I don't see there would be any more opportunity.
Yeah, the difference is we could ask in the future, of course, but there won't be any leverage to use in that conversation.
Tom or Paul, do you see this concept of coming up with a management structure part of this negotiation?
I don't know about management. I think ownership, we ought to define, as Paul says, as much detail as we can around the town, the green. Is that going to be public property? Is it going to be private property? I think there's some pieces that are part of this conversation. I'm not sure if management full blown we can get through.
Just a question. Earlier in the meeting, it was stated that the current Downs ordinance seemed acceptable to
Mhm.
Downs people in terms of what they wanted to do, that they didn't see change needed for what they wanted to do. Based on what we've heard and talked about, and Travis, you might be involved with this as well, do we think that the ordinance for the Downs right now is too liberal? Do we need to be thinking about something else in regards to the ordinance to suit us better in terms of what's happening, like with, I'll say sidewalks or parking or anything like that in that area? Do we, are we too open?
I wouldn't say so from a permitted use point of view. I mean, that by definition and design is a mixed use project, has to be. And I think what comes with that is the need for flexibility to do a lot of different things. I think that statement in the slide was a bit overstated. I believe there will be some changes that will be necessary, more kind of nuts and bolts, infrastructure related. For instance, that image of showing a main street that goes along one edge of this town center, their vision is to have zero curb. So that space, the paved space that is a road and on-street parking, can be used in conjunction with the green. Those sorts of things, Alan, as you know, aren't allowed in our zone currently. I think parking is another one that is likely not going to match up perfectly with what is a suburban parking code, frankly. So I think there will be some pieces, but they're not huge pieces that are going to be an opportunity for us to perhaps negotiate, other items from.
Design standards and things like that. The uses is what are
Yeah.
really where I think the Crossroads and the committee felt comfortable that it was meeting their needs. But design and being innovative, that's the piece that they'll come back
Yeah.
and make some suggestions on.
Yeah, and remarkably, they've only come to us once, in my recollection, Paul, for a potential modification to the zone, the permitted uses. And that had to do with warehouse and distribution. And in the end, they withdrew it. So remarkably, that CPD, appears to be satisfactory. And what they produced, I think, we're all pleased with. There's nothing shocking at this point.
And,
Yeah,
I think them withdrawing it actually probably led to IDEX coming because they didn't end up doing the project that I think they had on the hook, so to speak. So.
Yep.
I just know it was really good to see Rocky on the meeting regarding electric vehicles and see where that may go in the future. But again, just as we look at developing this, I think it's important that we include whatever might be happening in terms of the electrical vehicle portion of it moving forward, because by the time the Downs is completed, I'm sure that ordinance is going to be in place. And I don't want to get behind in terms of what we're doing from an ordinance standpoint versus what they're building currently or about to build.
And just a point, additional point. I did talk with Jamie Fitch about their timeline
Yep.
for us getting back to them on the sustainability proposal on electric vehicles. So we can discuss that in February and still be within their working timeframe.
All
So
right.
that's why it's not on the agenda now.
Okay.
We'll hit that in February. So it does sound like there's some room for us to maneuver and do the types of things that I think we can do well. And having Paul here as our liaison is going to be great to keep us sort of within our lane, if you will. And there's a lot to do in our lane. And anyway, as we have so much to do within our normal types of activities with regard to the Downs and the downtown. So I think that's something that maybe we'll discuss with our second item on the strategic plan. But I do think there's a lot that we can do as a board and as staff, and particularly in the beginning, engaging our businesses and really talking about what they need. And I'm going to say up front, if we don't get a bakery here soon, I ain't going to be hung out to dry, because every week I have at least 2 calls about, why don't we have a bakery? And how about this bakery? So we're
I never should
working
have
as
given my
best.
daughter your phone number.
So bakery has to be here somewhere. I'm just putting that out there.
It was one of the
It's
only
Rosemont,
public
not-
comments we received.
Is Rosemont not?
There, I think Rosemont is going to be great, but Rosemont is a small grocery store and other full-on bakery.
Yeah.
Karen's in bonus plan, she gets a big bonus at the bakery.
I get cake, right?
Pushing it so hard.
I get cake.
So I guess, what do we need to be able to support Karen in sort of next steps of execution on? I mean, should we be coming up with sort of a timeline ourselves
Yes.
and then figure out, are there dollars to this, to these initiatives or to these steps, and then thinking about the areas that we want to support that. So local business is one, and then maybe just off the top of my head, a more maybe some larger marketing areas to support some of the business components of and I guess one question too is, very generic industry sectors listed on this, but does, to Paul's point and to Tom's point, do we, can Rocky share some of at least the sectors that he's thinking of that would be on their radar to be looking at, and how do we support those, assuming that they're again in line with what we think the town would want?
I think that's absolutely something that we can have Rocky and Dan and maybe the Willis company who represents them. I think that could be a nice workshop for us
Yeah.
to sit down and share. Here's what we know
Mhm.
about the market. We certainly work collaboratively with them. If I've got a business that I think works with the Downs, we're calling them and doing the referrals. So I think sitting down and talking about that with them will help clarify how we can be of assistance.
Yeah.
And how, not just be of assistance, but be of assistance in a way that achieves our goals.
Well, I can guide them.
Yeah,
in some way.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, remember, and I have a separate question, but I mean, once, let's say the exemption is granted, I mean, they present some sort of master plan and the council approves it and grants this exemption. I mean, they're not going to be able to finance these buildings without tenants
Right.
committed to them ahead of time.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's, they should know what, sort of what type of tenants they should be
Right.
looking for. But one question I had though is, do you see any, from your conversations with the council and I mean, do you think that this exemption will be an issue? I mean, is it something that SEDCO will need to support in order to?
I think it needs to roll out more is what I would say. Oh, we lost Tom and Paul.
Yes.
They must have checked out before
Yeah, I
that.
knew I was gonna ask that.
The recording there.
I think at some point, a commentary on it will make sense. I don't know if they mentioned it, but they have hired a consultant to really help them look through some of those decisions.
Okay.
And it's somebody that Jay and I know well and feel very comfortable. They come from both really a planning perspective, which I think puts a complete picture on this. So I think we'll get some very good feedback.
They
from the
use in the
consultant.
town now.
The town
Okay.
is engaging. I
Mhm.
believe that was approved last night. I can't remember whether or not the actual consultant on the, anyway, we can talk about that. I'll get that out to you this week or early next week on what the consultant is supposed to be doing. But I think that's gonna help a lot. And so I think at this point, we can step back from that and um, react to what the consultant says if we need to support or do anything else on that public policy matter.
When we talk about reaching out to local business,
Mhm.
can we adjust that to the small business or maybe a local business and local small business?
I think it's a
Yeah.
great thing.
I'm a little bit new to the presentation. I'm very new.
That's-
But,
We all are.
but it's not obvious where when I think about a main street, I think about storefronts,
Mhm.
you know, 700 to 1,200
Mhm.
square foot
Mhm.
spaces, bing, 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 bing. And I see a small area of that represented. But it really seems to me that there's an opportunity to do more. And then I wonder, here we have a brand new development in the center of town. We have a lot of businesses that are on the periphery
Mhm.
who are a mile or two away. And I see, you know, the space for a grocery. How many more groceries do we need in this town? Can we look at something that's a little bit more innovative, where we have a space that's like a grand market, you know, like Faneuil Hall,
Yeah.
Mhm.
where that gives an opportunity to local businesses to come in and have a smaller footprint,
Or the public-
400,
Or the
200,
public market.
Or public
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then
more successful.
and then
Yes.
and then offer that to the existing small businesses in Dunstan and Oak Hill,
Yeah.
and leave it up to them to say, you know what, I'm good where I'm at.
Yeah.
Because I would love to have
Mhm.
some exposure, you know, for something.
I was
In
thinking
that
of what
industrial,
you're saying.
yeah.
And I think, I also think, like, one of the things we talked about a lot was, how do you phase this in but still have it feel like it's real?
Mhm.
So it's not that they're building a downtown for the next 5 years and then we can all go there,
Right.
because nobody's gonna move in if they feel like they're operating in a construction site. So I do think, I mean, Jim, I do think at one point we kind of talked about, how can we maybe more permanently than a pop-up model, use the downtown as space to promote what exists in Scarborough already, to bring the community into the downtown, businesses, let people do all their shopping there, discover what exists. And maybe that's something that can be done in a more sort of developed more permanently. But it's a way to make the downtown a place for you to go in spring 2023, when there's a road there, because stuff exists, there's stuff to do.
When you talk about growing up and needing the residential to be there, in a lot of resort communities and city communities, your first floor retail, and then the beds up above. Is that part
Yeah,
of
I think
this?
that's what they talked about. The last number they used, and I'm sure this is gonna go up and down 1,000 times, about 60,000 square feet of retail and restaurant, which, I mean, if there are a bunch of small ones, that can be a whole bunch of small ones, but there would be ground level residential.
But I think one of the unique things that, but I think it's one of our strong points that I think we can easily achieve is to go and meet with the small businesses and talk about what's your. I think we have to recognize that some people may support it, some people may fear what it may do to their business. Like, are they gonna,
Right, for sure.
you know?
Yeah.
Is everybody just gonna go to the downtown and not everything? So I think that's part of what we have to work with
That
the local
connectivity.
businesses.
Yeah.
That connectivity is gonna be really.
Yeah, and what types of things would be complementary as opposed to competition for businesses. And I think only the folks in town like you and others can tell us what that might be. And that's the type of information I think could be really helpful for us and the Downs.
I haven't read the full report. What other communities did you guys look at in terms of examples? Because I'd be curious as to what the local businesses around those downtowns that were built.
That's a very
What,
nice-
how, what was the impact? Were there causes that ended up down because this new downtown focus occurred? Or
Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't on that subcommittee, and I don't even
Okay.
know
I know,
if we get
Mashpee
into that.
Commons.
Mashpee Commons is the one that came up. with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Mashpee.
I can't, I've got to, there's in the appendices, there's a whole report on all of the different pieces that they went to. You would think I would remember them, but I don't.
I think it would be
Yeah.
good for us to, from a business standpoint, look at
Mhm.
the impact that some of these other downtown projects have had on the outside perimeters.
This is super important.
Right.
And I think to both of your points, how do we mitigate that? And how do we invite them in or whatever?
Right.
it is?
Right.
I mean, that's a year right there in terms of talking to people and bringing them along and, maybe setting up a meeting with Rocky and Dan and, talk about their ideas and just having an open dialogue. I do think that's something that we can do well and will be helpful in this whole process.
And I was thinking too, the other thing that I wasn't really seeing, and again, I think it's maybe is medical centers, not medical marijuana centers, but medical centers. Like, I just was curious as to, again, if in order to, I'm thinking about, you said the workshop last night was, here's a proposal for apartment housing. And one of the concerns was the surrounding services that are not around that project, that proposal. So if you're going to have a community like this, a downtown with a lot of residential and businesses, is there an intent to have some medical facilities there to help support that?
The original prediction, or the original plan that was looked at back in 2018, there was a significant amount of medical office, both small, some of it small being
Okay.
in the downtown, but some of it being, really larger facilities, maybe on the outskirts of downtown. So that's definitely part of their concept, is that the medical office, that's probably one of the few offices that will continue to grow. But
Because I was curious about Martin's Point,
yeah,
where that has gone with discussions of their corporate offices and things like that.
they've been quiet about, I haven't heard anything else. I should reach out
Yeah.
and double check on that again.
I mean, certainly losing wax has made an impact.
Right,
So,
right.
Okay.
So Dave, you've been really quiet. I just want to check in with you to see, because the reminder, Dave is
I know.
leaving as of this meeting. This is his end of his meeting, but you are always welcome to come back.
I appreciate it. And I will, I'm sure, pipe in from time to time, even if you don't want me.
So what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, I've been quiet because I've been in agreement with people have been saying, so I don't really have a dissension in any way. I think my concerns are similar in terms of the exemption. It just makes me a little nervous to hear that they want a blanket exemption rather than a targeted exemption. But I haven't been listening to all those town council meetings and everything. So there's a lot of information that I don't know. So that's why I don't feel that it has something major to contribute there. But knowing that that they are asking to basically have, it sounds, I should say, like they're asking to basically be able to expedite their residential growth as fast as they want. That just is a red flag to me. I hope, and it does sound like there's a lot of people really thinking very carefully about it. So I trust it's in good hands. Understanding that there is a component that would need to be added as part of the downtown, but I think that a number really needs to be agreed upon. Just speaking in terms of medical, I'll just pipe in a little bit here that I'm working on a project over at Rock Row in Westbrook, and for a medical campus there. And there has been a lot of interest that the developer has been getting. So hopefully, if there is some interest in medical for the Downs, that I think there could be some overflow for people that don't get into that facility. So I think that it's always great, to see some medical office, accessibility in a downtown. Look at what Rock Row is basically a little downtown. They're trying to create a little area that has everything. I mean, it's not Westbrook's downtown, but it's its own downtown. And I would definitely be in favor of seeing some of that come into the Downs too.
Rick?
You're muted. Oh, and frozen.
Man. Double whammy.
Oh, take a picture of that.
Apologies. Sorry, I'm not with you today. I returned from Washington this week sick.
Uh,
Not COVID, but baby sickness has passed on. But anyway, I think the project obviously is a benefit to the town. I do have some concerns about the changes the developer regarding the number of units they can build. Unfortunately, involved in another transaction where a similar request may be made, so I probably shouldn't take a position one way or the other that might very well be consistent with another client. So I guess that's the way I see it at this point.
but Rick, how do you?
You're all frozen.
Okay. We'll come back.
Go ahead. You keep freezing.
You too.
I don't know if it's my end or your end, but you keep freezing.
So I think just to kind of
Go ahead.
I think that it would just, I think would be helpful in the next few meetings to continue having this discussion and how kind of keep brainstorming and support and our support, but you know, help try to figure out some of the support for the local businesses and maybe bring that back to the table and on how to execute that. So, you know, my last thought on this just is that this is a great place for us to be with the Downs project. I mean, we could be in a very different place than where we are in from a negative standpoint. I think the fact that with COVID, you know, they are so far ahead of this project, and that's actually a really good thing. And I know that it feels rushed and feels a little scary to be having this discussion 5 years in, but at the same time, I do think that this is exceeding a lot of people's expectations, the project itself, the whole development of the area. So, and I think things seem to be going really well. And I just think this could be a very different conversation if things hadn't been going well.
Yeah, and not even just on the timeline, which is
No,
great.
yeah,
You gotta remember, we've got local owners.
Yeah.
Which is huge compared to if someone had come in from out of state or, they have a big connection. I think they, you know, I just think that we should trust them, you know, and I think
there's a level, yes.
we just need to figure out what role is appropriate for SEDCO
Yes.
to play in encouraging this and not maybe so much, I don't know, trying to direct what ends up happening, but how do we encourage it and how do we?
I think keep
help in
doing the
doing
good
it.
things that
Yeah.
they've been doing
Yeah.
and not veer because everything is fast forwarding. So. Okay. The next item on our agenda, unless there's any other discussion, any last thoughts? Okay. Strategic plan. You want to?
Sure. So I think there are two things that were coming together for me. One, from a staff perspective, 10 years ago, we had a consultant do a strategic plan for us, and there were 5 major objectives, of which we've really fundamentally, I think, achieved those 5 pieces. We've got the comprehensive plan, the downtown plan, and the vision committee is going to start up again shortly in January. And what I felt the piece that was missing for me was really an organizational strategic plan. So policy, we're good on, you know, that's being worked on. What I think is time for us to do again is this focus on how do we function as an organization? what types of goals should we have for the next 5 years? How should we go about our business, if you will? And the fact that Andrea and Kevin and David, if he was interested, I know he's trying to get out of this, but I keep trying to drag it back in.
Not trying to get out, just timing wise, just try to release some time for the moment.
I felt like, these guys are uniquely suited to be one step removed from the board, to really work with staff on focusing on this strategic plan. And the strategic plan, has both the goal of setting some goals and performance measures, which we kind of have in our heads, but we've never really articulated. What do we see? What do we think we can achieve in the I think Kevin and Andrea, who have been really meeting with Magda and I on a weekly basis since the pandemic started. So they are really incorporated into, the day-to-day staff issues. Like I said, I think they're uniquely suited to focus on the strategic plan for the board. And what I envision is they'll be working with us, with staff, and then they would be coming back to you in the meetings and reporting on progress of the strategic plan, and then really developing a workshop where we, go through some of the questions and goals that could be. I imagine that the strategic plan, will take us 6 months to do at a minimum. So I do see them coming back and being part of our board meetings, but obviously they're not voting members. So that's really the proposal in a nutshell. I think I listed some types of things, but we can come back, I think, in February, if it's the board's pleasure, to really outline what we see happening in the strategic plan and what areas of focus make sense. And if there's anything that people have right now that they think really need the focus in a strategic planning format, mention it now or send us information or send us an email or whatever. But I think the first question is, does that make sense to everybody to really focus on the strategic plan and have Kevin, Andrea, and Dave, and maybe Maureen, if Maureen as a former board member would be interested, really using their unique status to spearhead that work for you.
I think just to add to that, I think about 9 years ago, is that when I started?
Yes.
There was a lot of, I don't want to say uncertainty, but a little bit of uncertainty about the future of SEDCO, and sort of making sure that that it was viable in many ways. And I think that the strategic plan allows for not just the board, but the town, and to understand our role and the value that we bring to supporting the community as a whole. So I just think this is a good guide for us, and having talked with Karen and Magda and Kevin, they're not twisting our arms to do this. And that maybe a little bit now, but that I think it's a good step for continuing the good work that this board has been able to do.
I mean, I'll just say, I think, we're at this inflection point in Scarborough where things can't happen fast enough here. And it's all the more important that our role is delineated, because, this is the place everybody wants to be. And I think it's really important that we have a strong mission, and my place at the table is secure. And so I'm thrilled that you are interested in doing this and you want to stick around and do this work for us. And so I think it's a fantastic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's great that we can keep them involved. So we put them to stay involved.
That's the new chair.
So I'm trying to think.
Think about like the 3 years that I've been involved, and boy, did I come at the right time for activity. I mean, it was right as the Downs was about to be bought, and I mean, couldn't have asked for more things to be happening, and it's a great time, like you guys are saying, to really be able to have an important say in what continues to happen. And on the strategic planning committee topic there, I mean, if there's a minor behind the scenes role that I could help out with, absolutely, I'd be interested.
Great, thanks, Dave.
When I look at the growth of this town, I believe that when I got here in '95, there were like just over 7,000 people. In 2006, there were 12,000. As of the 2020 census, we're at 22,000, and we're heading for 29 to 30 by the end of this decade. When you think of that kind of growth and how do we position ourselves without something like a strategic plan? We don't know how we want to focus our energies and efforts to best serve the town. So it makes complete and total sense that we put something like this together and that we all, I'll say, buy in so that we can drive it forward. So it makes total sense.
I like it because what I feel like happens a lot is you take an issue like Downs. I feel like as major issues come up and we meet, a lot of times our agendas are sometimes depend based on what's going on at that time. And I feel like there's always a part of the discussion has to be like, kind of like we just did, what's our role going to be? And if there's a way to sort of flush that out, bigger picture, then it's sort of like, you might be better suited as issues come up to know what angle we're going to go in at and how we're going to approach it. Instead of saying, well, how exactly every sort of piecemeal, every issue that comes up, well, how do we want to be involved in this? If there's a bigger picture way of doing that, I think that's a valuable thing.
And that helps the council know too.
Yeah.
Put it on paper.
Right.
This is our role. This
Right.
is what we're doing.
Exactly.
And
Are
it,
there- I'm sorry.
oh, go, no, Jim, you go.
Are there other community economic development corporations that we can talk to, that we can, is there that conduit for conversation where we can say, what's worked well for you?
Yeah.
Can I make a quick endorsement of our team? I've been contacted by more than one member of regional economic development corporations asking how the hell we do it. So we're kind of the big brother, I think.
I would say that almost every corporation in this area has started with us and are using our bylaws.
Okay.
But I think that does, looking at talking with Freeport, I think it is healthy to, even though they model themselves after us, it's still helpful to check in with the children and see what's happening.
Well, what's working and what's not. I mean, I think those are,
Exactly.
there's always learning
Right.
points to this.
Right,
So,
right. And I do imagine Kevin and Andrea talking
Mhm.
with each of the council members too.
Mhm.
And I think one question is where do you bring the chair
of
in
course.
in
Yeah.
that type of piece? But I
Right.
do think that one-on-one conversation that doesn't have a board member and that doesn't have staff talking individually to counselors, we learn a lot.
Mhm. Do we need a motion?
I would say
I'm gonna
yes.
say that, so anyone like to make a motion for a development of a strategic plan for the SEDCO board to be led by Kevin Freeman and myself.
Third.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Kevin and Andrew, they
Right.
just love work, don't they?
So I do want, I have 1 minute, so I apologize. I do want to does anyone have anything for the roundtable that they really wanted to be able to share with this group, including Dave and Rick? Is there anything?
Thank you for your leadership. And it's too bad Kevin's not here to hear it, but I know you guys are going far. It's been just a joy the past 3 years being on this board, and I think having strong leadership is a big part of it. Commitment and your willingness to keep working with us anyway. So just an enormous gratitude.
Thank you.
And to Dave, and to Kevin, who's
Yeah.
who had to.
I don't know when I'll ever see you again.
I know.
Sends you across the
Yeah.
street.
Now we get a beer together.
Right.
Right?
One quick question though.
Yeah.
In terms of the size of our board, I think they're adding some new members needs to,
Yeah.
That's gonna be probably a priority.
definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're legally okay at 5, just
We are.
for the record. The bylaws establish that. But yes, we're in recruitment mode. if you
Yeah,
will.
and so one of the things I would just say is, think about, some folks that you think would be good. We did a little while ago, a couple of years ago, I think it was, looked at different sectors of representation that would be appropriate for this board. And so it might be good to send that back out to the team. So that we can just take another look at that and it may have changed. I mean, we may need to look at it from a different perspective.
Housing is a.
But housing, yeah.
And one question I had is, so a couple months ago, there's a woman, her name was Amy Sharifa Floor. She has a son Connor's age, and she is in finance at IDEX, I think. And she actually, when I mentioned, was somewhat receptive. So if, I mean, it was a timing, it's a, but if you find someone that is interested or wants to pursue it, is there certain steps, like should they go right away and fill out the application? Like,
I would say yes.
I
okay,
would.
Go ahead and fill out the application, because the process is, you fill out the application from the town clerk.
Yeah.
And then she usually sends it over to us, but it does need to go to the council's appointments committee, and they do the final approval. And we generally recruit, the only thing that's a little funky is that it does require town residency,
yes.
and unless it is from a Scarborough business and they're very high up in, the bylaws are a little vague, but the assumption is that the majority or most people are going to be residents, as well as representing those areas of the business community that we feel are in need.
So I just want to say thank to all of you. And I know this is not my last seat at the table, but one of the things that I was just really excited about when we were talking about the strategic plan is to continue to be involved. Because I think there's, it is more than I ever thought it would be in terms of my own personal development and learning about how to support the town and be an influencer in a way. That's who I am anyway, but that to be a part of the positive growth I think that is happening here. So thank you all. And with that, I want to just wish all of you happy holidays, safe, healthy holidays. And I guess I took a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Dave, too.
Thank you, Dave.
I was going to say, I'll echo that gratitude, and I've really enjoyed my time with you guys too, and it's like I said, it's purely just a matter of trying to get some time back for me. My interest in what's going on has not waned whatsoever. So once my kids grow a little and they can start, getting activities a little more on their own and all that, I hope that there will be a potential seat for me back there again. To definitely want to continue to help out however I can. So thank you.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
We're
Meeting
adjourned.
adjourned.
All right,
Done.
thanks, guys.
Right.